The apartment with no records. What if a place existed inside the Chinese government that officially didn't exist at all? No address, no power records, no digital footprint. But people still went there. Regularly. Silently. And one of them used to be Xi Jinping's most trusted archivist. In this episode, we follow the trail of a room that's not on any map, an apartment that holds no resident, and a silence so carefully maintained, it might be hiding the truth about what, and who, China chose to forget. This is not just a story about a building. It's about what happens when power needs a place to disappear into. Welcome to the apartment with no records. The visitor who signed nothing. Beijing has a way of swallowing the strange. It hides the unusual in plain sight, tucks it behind identical concrete walls, gray staircases, and utility meters that hum whether someone lives there or not. That's what made Building 103 on Xuanwu Lane so easy to miss. It looked like every other government housing block in the area. 12 floors, beige paint peeling at the corners, and a rusted mail slot no one had used in years. Except for apartment 5 to 17. There was no door plate, no name, no number on the mailbox. And yet, once a week, every Thursday afternoon at precisely 2:43 p.m., a black car would stop at the rear service entrance. Same make, same license prefix, same protocol. Driver stays inside, passenger enters through the back staircase, never the front. Security footage from the building never showed the face clearly. The system always seemed to malfunction during those minutes. No timestamps. No audio. Just a faint blur, a dark coat, and a flash of something shiny. A badge, maybe, but not a visible one. That visitor never signed the guest registry. Never interacted with residents. Never triggered building entry logs. But someone always knew he had arrived. Because 15 minutes after he entered, the building Wi-Fi would drop. Not just in 5 to 17, through the entire complex. And then, silence. A neighbor, Mrs. Gao, once told her daughter she thought the apartment was cursed. "It's not haunted," she whispered. "It's protected." 4 years, apartment 5 to 17 had no tenant listed on city records. No water usage. No gas. But the electric bill? Always paid, manually, in cash, at a nearby utility office. When the clerk tried to trace the account, the system flagged it as government sealed. In 2022, a local real estate assessor named Li Feng was sent to evaluate the block. His report was routine, until he knocked on 5 to 17 and got no answer. The door looked ordinary, but something felt off. Not heavy. Hollow. Like it wasn't meant to open at all. He marked it as unoccupied and moved on. 2 weeks later, he received a call from a number with no caller ID. A calm voice said, "Your report should not mention 5 to 17 again." No threat. Just instruction. He revised the document the next day. So what was inside? The answer came from someone who shouldn't have been there at all. A food delivery rider, working for a freelance app, claimed to have accidentally entered the apartment during a batch drop-off. The order was for 5 to 18, but the hallway lights were out, and he misread the number. The door opened before he could knock. A hand reached out, took the bag silently, and closed it again. But the rider swore on 2 things. First, the hallway smelled like old paper, not rot, but ink, like a printing room. And second, he saw, for just a split second, what looked like a wall covered in red folders. Not white. Not yellow. Red. The kind used for internal party documents. The kind that never leave Zongnanhai. The kind that are supposed to be destroyed after review. 3 days after telling his friend about the encounter, the writer's app login was revoked. His delivery account flagged for suspicious behavior. He never worked again. His WeChat messages stopped syncing, and his phone began overheating for no reason. A week later, he left Beijing. Some say he went south, to Fujian. Others say he changed his name. But before disappearing, he left one note behind, slipped under his friend's door. It wasn't an apartment. It was a vault. That was the first time someone suggested 5 to 17 wasn't about hiding a person. It was about hiding a memory. The man who wasn't erased. His name was Chen Rong, though you won't find it in any public directory anymore. Not in academic publications, not in party rosters, not even in internal meeting minutes. It's not that he was erased. It's that someone tried to erase him and failed halfway through. Chen wasn't a politician. He was a memory technician. His job, officially, was archival refinement at the Central Policy Review Office. Unofficially, he was known among insiders as the man you called when you needed to make a report disappear without deleting it. Not censorship, refinement. Language softened, intentions blurred, outcomes redefined. He could take a political purge and reframe it as organizational realignment. He was, in many ways, the last editor of history before it hit the record. But something changed in 2019. Quietly, without announcement, Chen resigned. No scandal, no health issue. Just walked out of his post one day and never returned. Normally, that would be the end. But Chen didn't vanish. He was seen, just rarely, and always in the same place, entering Building 103 on Xuanwu Lane. Apartment 5 to 17. Neighbors started to notice. Not because of anything loud. Chen was never loud, but because of how everything around him seemed to pause when he was near. Conversations would stop. Phones would lose signal. Even pets would grow still. A cat belonging to Mrs. Gao, the same woman who once said the place was protected, refused to cross the 5th-floor landing when he was around. One neighbor, a retired state librarian, once offered Chen a nod in the hallway. He said Chen paused, looked him in the eye, and asked, "Do you remember what happened in 2007? The man said, "Of course." Chen responded, "You're lucky. Some of us were told to forget it." He then entered 5 to 17 and closed the door. That comment set off whispers. What had Chen worked on? What was he doing now? Someone dug into old print archives, hoping to find his name. And they did, once. A footnote in a 2006 policy paper titled Long-Term Narrative Consistency Strategies. It credited Chen Rong as a consulting editor. But the odd part, that same paper, in later editions, listed the footnote number, with no name attached. Who removes a name from a footnote but leaves the number? Then, in 2021, an anonymous post appeared on a small digital philosophy forum run out of Singapore. The title, "The Memory Needs a Place to Sleep." It was written in perfect Mandarin, formal but poetic. It spoke of a man who had worked so long in the language of forgetting that he had begun storing fragments of deleted history in his mind, just to make sure it didn't vanish entirely. The post ended with a cryptic line. "I don't keep copies. I keep it in the 5th room, 17th step." Most people ignored it. Except one reader. A data analyst in Chengdu noticed that the IP address of the post was routed through a server used exclusively by government facilities in Beijing. When she tried to trace it, her system froze. Not crashed, froze. No error message. Just a screen locked on one line of code. Access denied. Archival continuity mode. She never posted again. All signs pointed back to one possibility. Chen Rong hadn't disappeared. He had relocated to an apartment with no lease, no mailbox, no registry, but still very much in use. And perhaps more importantly, the only person inside 5 to 17 who knew what had been deleted, and why. Because if there was one thing worse than being erased, it was being remembered by someone who shouldn't exist. The architect who left no drafts. Nobody remembered his real name, not even the people who worked under him. In government circles, he was simply referred to as the architect. A quiet man with thinning hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and the kind of voice that never rose above a whisper. He never gave speeches, never took credit. But every 5-year plan had his fingerprints on it. Every pivot in national strategy, every quiet economic recalibration, somewhere behind it all was him. He didn't work in Zongnanhai. He worked 2 blocks away, in a gray building with no nameplate. A building whose floor numbers skipped the 5th entirely. Nobody was ever assigned to the 5th floor. But lights were sometimes seen glowing from behind frosted glass. That's where the architect worked. Or at least, that's what people assumed. But then one day, he stopped showing up. No retirement announcement. No funeral. Just absence. A week later, a memo was sent out to all departments he had previously advised. Project continuity will be maintained. Do not attempt contact. No one dared ask questions. Until a junior analyst in the Central Policy Modeling Unit, someone who had briefly assisted him years earlier, noticed something strange. Every plan the architect had ever submitted followed a rigid structure: scenario modeling, risk factor indexing, projected social feedback curves. But when she ran his last 5 submissions through a pattern recognition program, she found a gap. Not in the content, in the rhythm. It was like reading a sentence where something had been replaced with silence. She went back through older drafts. Same thing. Sections of white space, expertly buried, not empty, just unreadable. She used forensic software to recover metadata. What she found was chilling. Every one of those gaps had a file link embedded. Not visible, not clickable, but existing. And each one was labeled with a single string of digits. 5175177517. Repeated again and again, like an echo trapped inside the code. She ran a location query. Nothing came up, except a construction log for Building 103, Apartment 5 to 17. The record was marked unclassified, which shouldn't have been possible. Housing units don't get classification tags, especially not residential apartments. She sent a request for access. Denied. She tried again using her supervisor's credentials. The next morning, she was reassigned. No explanation. A sudden transfer to agricultural forecasting. Nothing to do with policy modeling. Her terminal access was revoked. Her backup files deleted. But before she left, she printed one page. A list of keywords that had been consistently blacklisted across the architect's last projects. Not political phrases. Not taboo names. Just one category: memory anchor points. Phrases like before reform, original version, unedited directive, early draft, all flagged, all scrubbed, all erased. She began to suspect the architect hadn't retired. He had been redirected, moved not because he failed, but because he remembered too much. And there was only one place someone like that could be sent, a place with no public schedule, no office hours, no outputs. Just silence. A vault. Apartment 5 to 17. Some say he still works there. Not drafting policy anymore, but cataloging what was removed. Keeping a ledger of China's unseen decisions. Not to publish them. Not to expose them. Just to make sure they aren't completely lost. One day, someone left a handwritten message on the park bench across the street from Building 103. No camera caught who placed it there. The note read, "The first drafts tell the truth, but the final versions are what we live with." Below it, in tiny numbers, 517. The bench was removed the next day. The room that rewrote itself. Nobody was ever seen cleaning it. No furniture delivery trucks ever stopped outside. No maintenance crews logged work orders. And yet, somehow, apartment 5 to 17 always changed. The neighbor across the hall swore the door was a different color every month. Sometimes a slightly darker shade of brown, other times a more polished sheen. Once, he said, it had a vertical scratch down the middle. A week later, it was gone. Inside, though, no one could say what the apartment looked like. No floor plan. No photos. But a former government contractor claimed to have seen the blueprints, once. During a compliance audit years ago. He said it had no kitchen. No bathroom. Just 4 walls and a single door inside, leading nowhere. A decoy, maybe. Or something else entirely. In early 2023, a mid-level cybersecurity engineer named Tang Wei was assigned to investigate a strange anomaly in the city's residential VPN logs. The problem? An encrypted stream was pinging out from Building 103 every Thursday afternoon, just after 3 p.m. Same time every week. Always the same data length. Always terminating in a silent node deep within the Ministry of State Security. Tang was good at his job. Too good, maybe. He traced the signal to 5 to 17 and submitted a report with 2 questions. Who authorized the stream? What was it transmitting? He never got an answer. But 3 days later, Tang received a sealed envelope in his home mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a printed screenshot, his own report, with 1 line highlighted in red. Possible internal feedback loop. Data returns to origin node. In simple terms, whatever was being sent back to itself. Tang froze. That shouldn't be possible. Data doesn't loop without corruption. Unless the system wanted to erase its own memory. He went back to the building. Not through the front. He posed as a delivery technician and entered through the service stairs. As he reached the 5th floor, the lights flickered. His phone shut off. Static leaked from his Bluetooth earpiece. When he stepped in front of 5 to 17, he didn't knock. He just stood there, listening. He heard nothing. But later, reviewing his smartwatch logs, he noticed something terrifying. His heart rate dropped during the time he stood outside the door. Not from calm. From suppression. Like something in the space had dampened his nervous system. He left immediately. Resigned within a week. Nobody's heard from him since. A year later, a building maintenance file was leaked anonymously to an architecture student forum. It detailed upgrades to an unregistered unit in Building 103. Electromagnetic shielding. Smart glass sound redirection. Pressure-sensitive flooring. But the most important line: adaptive interior architecture initiated. Room has begun iterative spatial reconfiguration. Which means the room was changing itself. Not manually. Programmatically. As if someone or something was rewriting the space in response to who entered it. One theory began circulating among former party insiders. 5 to 17 wasn't a storage unit. It wasn't hiding documents. It was testing reality itself. A space where memory, records, language, and observation could be altered to see what stuck. If that were true, then apartment 5 to 17 wasn't just a secret. It was a filter. And the people who went inside weren't hiding from the system. They were helping design the version of China the system wanted people to remember. The silence that still pays rent. The rent was always paid. Every month. On time. In cash. But no one ever saw who paid it. The building superintendent, Mr. Zhou, said it was the only unit in the complex that never required repair requests. No plumbing issues. No light bulb changes. No tenant complaints. But once a year, like clockwork, an envelope would arrive. Thick, slightly yellowed, always sealed in a red string tie. Inside, the exact amount due, plus 200 yuan extra, for no questions. Mr. Zhou never touched it. He just handed it to the same man who came to collect it each year. The man never spoke. Just nodded. And vanished. But one year, he didn't come. Instead, a woman appeared. Younger. Dressed in a black overcoat, clipboard in hand, and an expression that said she'd been briefed on how to forget what she was about to see. She took the envelope, looked around the lobby, and asked one question. Has anyone entered the apartment recently? Mr. Zhou shook his head. Not that I've seen. She left. But afterward, something changed. CCTV footage in the hallway began disappearing. Not corrupted. Overwritten. Maintenance logs auto-archived with blank timestamps. Even the building's blueprints on the city's infrastructure site were replaced with a version that labeled the 5th floor as structurally condensed, meaning no apartment 5 to 17. But residents knew better. Mrs. Gao, the old woman who had lived across from 5 to 17 for decades, swore she heard footsteps inside the apartment late one night. Not heavy ones, just slow pacing, back and forth, like someone was rehearsing a memory they weren't allowed to say out loud. Then came the most unusual thing of all. The silence spread. Neighbors began forgetting small things. A family couldn't remember what year they moved in. A young couple misplaced their wedding photos and insisted they'd never taken any. Even Mr. Zhou forgot how long he'd been working there. And every time someone tried to talk about it, about 5 to 17, about the door, about the people who used to come and go, the same thing happened. They'd stop mid-sentence, blink, and say, "It's probably nothing." Eventually, people stopped asking, stopped remembering. The building became just another concrete block in a city full of them. But deep inside the bureaucracy, there were still traces. Fragments of flagged files that tech teams couldn't explain. Payment logs with no associated account. A maintenance record for a door that doesn't exist, stamped with the words, "Continuity maintained." One former official, speaking off record, claimed the apartment was part of an older system. Something built when the party realized that some things couldn't be deleted from the system, only hidden. Not in code, not in paper, in silence. Because silence doesn't leave fingerprints. It leaves shadows. And shadows, unlike people, don't need permission to stay. Today, apartment 5 to 17 still stands. The rent is still paid. The lights still flicker at 2:43 p.m. every Thursday. And the Wi-Fi still cuts out. No one answers the door. No one signs the log. But somewhere, behind that door, memory is still breathing. And it's not done yet. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with silence. An apartment with no records. A man who couldn't be erased. A room that rewrote itself. Maybe the most powerful secrets aren't the ones buried deep underground. Maybe they're just hidden in plain sight, behind a door no one wants to open. If this story made you look twice at what's missing, subscribe to Hidden Chapters. There's always another door. And we plan to open it.